Good morning. So, today on the Lantern Room, we're going to talk about what it means to belong. Um, most of us spend our lives looking for places where we feel at home. Sometimes we find that belonging in a family, a community, a friendship, or a landscape. Sometimes we discover that belonging begins within ourselves. So, today I'm going to explore what belonging has meant for me. I try to bring stories and true, authentic experiences to this place because I believe that that's how we learn through each other. So, when I think about the nature of belonging and where and when I've felt like I truly belonged, it's a hard question because I don't know if I ever felt like I belonged in anywhere really when I was younger. I tried to belong, but I always felt kind of different, I always felt kind of like I was looking at a world that was very, very different than who I was. I was an observant in that world. And I think I learned to adapt and become a person that would kind of fit within a world. But where do I feel like I belong? I guess the place where I feel like I belong the most is when I'm in big nature. So when I'm out in big nature, like on a cliff in Newfoundland, and there's the wind and the ocean and there's the power of the vibe of like I can feel it. You can feel it in your chest, I never feel alone when I'm out in nature. I feel like I belong. When I'm taking a walk in the woods and there's birds and everything's alive, there's squirrels everywhere and there's bugs or when you're outside at night and you're looking up at the moon and the stars, I feel like a very big sense of belonging when I'm outside in nature. And right. So that's the primary place where I feel like I belong. And when it comes to human beings and different societies, because I don't know, I tend to think that sometimes I have to be careful about how I speak when I'm with people, because I tend to just say what I think, So it can be like a dangerous thing depending on where you are and how you want to fit in, right? If you want to fit in, then you have to kind of sort of adapt to and I've become very good at it. I think a lot of people are good at it. But so yeah, where I feel like I really belong, like I went on a long camping trip in Newfoundland, all across the Maritimes, and with Buddy, and I never felt alone because I was immersed in a world that I belonged to. I was, I've always felt like we are as much part of nature as the animals, as the birds, as the wind, as the ocean. We are made of the same stuff as the stars. So I've always felt a deep connection to nature. Now, mind you, I was raised in the middle of nature. I don't know if I would feel that same way had I been raised somewhere else, right? We don't, maybe we're in another life or in between lives, we choose where we go next to learn our lessons, perhaps. But I don't know, right? We don't have a memory of the before we arrived here. So we don't know what the process is for sure as to how we come back, right? But I do believe we come back to earth to learn, to teach, to learn and to teach, to learn and to grow and then to learn, right? So all these life experiences, I feel, are meant for me to then transmit to others. So if we've lived a life of pain, I believe that we're here to learn through that, and then to teach through that, right? To transmute that learning into life experience, and then to perhaps teach others how to manage that. So I ended up being born in a region, where my mom was English and we were very poor, and my dad was French, but we spoke English at home. But we were immersed in the middle of the countryside of a very, very small town that was even further, like 3 miles away from a little village. And, it was just the four of us, my brother and my parents. And we lived very differently from anyone else. So the nature of belonging was first associated with family and home, but I always felt like a little bit of an outsider, even when I was young, because our home the family dynamics were very chaotic. So I was like, what am I doing here? Like I felt like a little adult looking around me going, okay, this family is a little bit crazy. And what am I doing here? And because I didn't have any we don't have much agency when you're young. So you're formed by those experiences, right? So I would look around and go, okay. And I spent most of my time outside with my brother. And we worked very, very hard because it was a back to the earth kind of lifestyle, and we didn't have much, so we had to grow our own food, and it's a lot of work growing your own food, and we had to heat our own home with wood, and so that means you have to chop wood and bring it in, like my brother did that. And so I guess my first taste of having to blend with a society was when I started to go to school at 5, and the world outside of my home was French and Catholic. And we weren't Catholic and we weren't French. So that was my first contact with the world, was basically this little village. And we would walk to the village sometimes, but we were kind of like alien beings in that village. Like there weren't very many English people, and we were hippies, and they were just normal French Catholic people. And, so I'm sure that we must have appeared to be very bizarre to the people in that little town. So when I started to go to school, I didn't dress like the other kids. I didn't eat like the other kids. I didn't speak like the other kids. And I guess I just was very quiet for the first years, just noticing, observing. And the first teachers I had were amazing. They made me feel welcome. Really. Like the Jardin teacher and then my grade 1 teacher, they both were very, very nurturing. And I was quiet, so I was a good kid, and I guess they felt sorry for me, and they would sneak little snacks to me and stuff, and just let me be. So for the most part, my primary school experience at this French school in this little village, for the most part, it was pretty good. I don't know that I felt like I was like everyone else, but because the community was so nurturing, and like I think they saw that I was intelligent, and they encouraged me, and I was pretty good at school. Home was chaos, but school was calm. I had French teachers who would who taught me slowly how to speak French, and I loved that welcoming vibe that I felt from the warmth, right, of French people. And so I learned French as best as I could. And I loved to read, and they would let me read in both French and English. And sometimes, I was terrified of public speaking. So anything that required working in groups and presenting terrified me. But they would often give me a pass on that. And I had one teacher who was really, really harsh with me in grade 2, and it could have destroyed me. It made me cry every day. She made me cry every day. She was pretty bad. But because I had the two first teachers, I could compare, right? So I just thought to myself, I was very stubborn. I thought one day I'll show you how to be a teacher. And that's sort of where the whole teaching thing came in, I think, was that nurturing environment. I would go home and my brother made a little desk and I would teach him. We would sit outside, like he would sit at this little desk and I would teach him. And he had a hard time writing. So I tried to teach him how to write and how to read. And I was probably a pretty harsh teacher, but I have fond memories of that. And I guess school, though I didn't feel like I particularly was like everyone else, I learned to adapt. And then I went to high school and I was, I was more aware of myself and I was starting to own my difference. And high school was a pretty rocky world in the sense that this is where we self-identify and and you become more aware of your home dynamics, right? So I was a bit more rebellious, and I was probably very different from my family too. Like we were all, yeah. I didn't want to be like my parents. I wanted to be myself, right? But my parents were also like encouraging me to, at least my father was, he was a pretty interesting guy. He would encourage me to be unique, right? He saw an artist in me and he wanted me to learn to play music. And I think he wanted to kind of transpose some of the cool things that he thought were cool, like learning how to play the guitar. He gave me guitar, and I would love to be musically inclined in terms of learning how to play an instrument, but it's not my forte. I'm still willing to try anything, but some things are easier for me than others. I think we can all grow in all kinds of directions. I think one day I'll be stubborn enough to learn how to play an instrument. It's on my list. But in terms of identity, I was starting to own my own sense of fashion, for example. So, I mean, we had no money, but even in high school, I had very little money, and so I would, my mother was a seamstress, and I would sometimes make my own clothes, or we would go shopping at, like now we have nice places like Value Village where they clean the clothes and they put them on racks and stuff. But we would go to the Salvation Army and I'd pick up an old sweater and a man's shirt and a big old tie, and I would wear different hats. And I was owning the artist in me in high school. Did I feel like I belonged? Not really, but when I had a cool set of friends, especially when I went to 2 high schools. And in Plantagenet, when I went there, I was in Casselman. Casselman was a pretty traditional kind of vibe. And then when I went to Plantagenet High School, it was a mix of English and French kids. And it was a big high school. So the more kids there are, right, the more chances there are of finding people who are kind of like you. And where's your tribe, right? So I found a bunch of kids, girls, who kind of like, we were 3 or 4 girls, and we were, I was kind of like my daughter Jess in high school, where I was very introverted, and I would kind of just chill and observe people before I made friends with them. And friends, even the notion of friends, of having long-term friends, just didn't exist for me because nothing had been stable, and I had been so isolated most of my life. I didn't bring kids home because it was very chaotic and traumatic. So school and home, 2 separate environments. And I made these friends, and it was okay, but I never thought they'd stay. And that's when I started to go out with my boyfriend too. I had a pretty loser boyfriend when I was 16, and didn't feel like I belonged in his world, that's for sure. And then, I'm sorry about the word loser, but he really was. That didn't last very long. And then I met my ex-husband very young, at 16. And his family was a true French-Canadian farming family. Did I feel like I belonged there? Not really, but I kind of adopted the Francophone community. I made a decision at that point. I could have continued down the path of like being an artist and kind of that funky style, and I could have. but I met my ex-husband, and that's where I started to think of paths, right? Which path am I going to take? Am I going to take this funky artist kind of? I was thinking of becoming a war journalist. I had always wanted to be a teacher. And then around 16, 17, it occurred to me that maybe I could do journalism and travel and be a photographer. And, that was that kind of wild side of me. I was a bit of a wild child in my head at that point. And I chose a safe path instead. Maybe because I knew that if I went the other way, I would be a bit self-destructive, honestly. So I chose a path where I knew I wanted kids, and I met my ex-husband was grounded in a family, or at least I thought, and I chose that path. I don't think I really felt like I belonged, and it took me forever to feel like I belonged in that society too. Eventually, they were very kind. Like, for the most part, the Francophone community is very kind and welcoming. And for years and years and years, I was a teacher in the community, and I felt like I belonged there. In that role, I felt like I belonged, right? More or less. More or less. I mean, I was always seen as the Anglophone person in a very French community. I was the English teacher, and, I had a very beautiful career and beautiful connections. And that's where I started to make friends, long-term friends, especially with fellow teachers of mine. And they were super supportive. And though they were not like me, we bonded. Some beautiful friendships came from that period of my life. Beautiful. And they're still my friends. And I consider myself so fortunate. But do I feel like I'm like them? Not really. I think they like me in my uniqueness. And I love them for their all of my friends are very unique. So I got divorced eventually, and I moved to Québec City. And I had a real struggle with finding a sense of belonging again, because whether or not I felt like the people in my region, I was used to the people in my region. I felt like I was a part of that fabric of society, even though I was different. And even though sometimes it was rocky, especially towards the end, when I had to kind of define my values against my own community to a degree, right? So it all worked out great until until during the pandemic, there was a massive deforestation going on around my home, and I didn't really realize to what degree it was important to me to protect the environment that I lived in. So you know how I said at the beginning that the environment was the one place I felt like I was belonged, right? So when they started to cut down all the trees everywhere, I just couldn't understand. I had a visceral reaction of protectiveness, not only for the trees, but also for the people within that environment. So, Francophone people are, at least where I lived, were rather passive. They didn't really know how to quickly galvanize and rise up against and protect their environment. It was happening so quickly. Thousands of acres of trees being cut, and I don't think they grasped the impact that it would have, that I could see might happen, right? So I was protective of the people and the culture, because I knew that Francophone culture is all about hunting and fishing and four-wheeling and skidooing in the woods. And I don't think the people understood the impact that it would have long-term over their world. But I saw it. I could see it, And so I felt like in those last 6 months, it only lasted a period of 6 months, very brief but very painful period, where I was like, okay, we're going to galvanize, we're going to organize, we're going to try to stop this, we're going to try to put some slow the pace of what's happening so that we can, and I realized I was up against a big machine. So so I left, because it was heartbreaking for me to walk down my road and see the forest being culled with no rhyme or reason, really, no real thoughtfulness to long-term preservation of of nature around. So I left, and I found myself in first on the island near Quebec City, and then Quebec City. And then I had to recreate a sense of who was I, strip away the idea of, okay, well, you were a teacher and you were a part of a Francophone community, and that's who you were, and now who are you? And you were a mom, and you are a mom, but your kids are grown, and like a whole identity shift. Finding my voice again. Who am I, right? Finding the artist again in me. I went into hermit mode, right? I went into kind of like a mode where I'm going to think about this. It's not a bad thing to go into hermit mode. It really isn't. And when you live through hard life experiences, and everything seems to be shifting around you, and you live what you think are tower moments, and the universe sends you things that happen, it's not a bad thing to go inwards and go, okay. I went into the mode that I was in when I was a teenager and just observing the world around me and trying to see. So I ended up working at a school and just slowly finding my way. And at first, I was really, really reactive because it seemed like chaotic. The school was pretty chaotic at first. And just like when I was a teenager, I would just observe the people around me and kind of try to figure out my bearings, right? And I think now, because I've spent a lot of time alone and rediscovering who I am, I've become much better at being discerning as to who I want to be surrounded by now. I value peace now. I've chosen peace. And I choose to align myself with people who have found their authentic voices. And because it's been a hard-won battle with myself primarily, but also in terms of values, right? I understand now that my values won't always align with other people's values, and that's okay. It's important to be able to feel like a part of a community, but not to the detriment of losing oneself. We are meant to shine as individuals within a community, and if the community can't accept who you are, then maybe it's time to move and find another tribe, right? So it takes time. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to go, how was I indoctrinated into a community via a family? Are my values really my values, or am I just kind of like going along with things because to keep the peace, right? And especially when you've had a chaotic and traumatic life when you were a child, who are the people who influenced me most, and how do they still influence me? I've had to take my distance from certain people in my life, and I've had to put up strong boundaries because I've realized that they were detrimental to my growth as a person. Not necessarily, they weren't necessarily bad people, but like I needed to be self-protective, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a healthy thing. One must learn to value the mission we've been given here. We have a mission, each of us, and the universe wants us to grow into better parts of ourselves, better people, more authentic people. There is a path toward the light, but it's tough sometimes. You have to choose the lonely path sometimes. You have to choose to move away sometimes from the very people that you love, because you need to become. So I have learned that the place where I belong the most is within myself, and that I can create beauty, I can create a peaceful environment, and I can invite into that environment the people who honor and respect me and that world that I live in. And I am so grateful now to have found that sense of who I am, and that I'm still developing that, right? It's a journey, and so grateful to have a tribe of, funky friends. and and I live in an environment now that is very beautiful, that respects the environment around it. So Québec City is not perfect, but they value their trees. They value a way of life that is good, that is wholesome for the most part, for people to live in, and that is a place where I feel like I belong more, at least than I have previously. We'll see. We'll see, I guess. But either way, no matter where I go, I think the place of belonging I feel the most is within myself, because I've kind of come to peace with that, a sense of self-acceptance and authenticity, so that no matter where I go, I bring my home with me. I hope that helps. I mean, these talks are very kind of like I start off with a train of thought and off I go. So I hope that helps. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.